Hello, welcome everyone back to Move for a Movement. I have with me here the co-founders and co-directors of the Rhode Island Women's Choreography Project, Eugenia Zinovieva, Melissa Wong, and Kristy. Oh my God, I'm forgetting your last name. Kristy
DuBois, sorry, I don't have it on my Zoom.
That's okay, I should know that. It's one thing I didn't prepare. DuBois, Kristy DuBois. Wonderful. So Eugenia Zinovieva, Melissa Wong, Kristy DuBois. Thank you all for coming. I'm so excited to talk about your organization, your work, all that good stuff. So thank you.
We're excited to be here. Thank you.
We are so thrilled to be here. All of us could talk extensively about women, female choreographers, and gender disparity in the dance world. So thank you so much.
Wonderful. That is one of my questions. So you can have at it. So first to start, I often like to just kind of lay out the mission statement, and then that's a good jumping off point for the work itself and how that came together, how the organization was founded. So that being said, the Rhode Island Women's Choreography Project has a dual mission to foster the creative voices of emerging female choreographers and to support the Rhode Island community through partnerships with local nonprofit organizations. How did that mission evolve and how did the organization come to be? So two parts there. Any of you can chime in for all the questions.
I guess I can kick it off. Those two questions I feel like are kind of, they're like very intertwined with each other because all three of us were dancers with Festival Ballet Providence. I still currently am. And in 2018, the two of our co-dancers, Hannah Klinkman and Louisa Mayer, realized that we hadn't had a single female choreographer on the roster all season. There used to be opportunities for the dancers to create their own pieces too. And it was just a strange season where it hadn't worked out that year, but they were kind of feeling like they had creativity that they needed to get out. And so they decided to create their own opportunity and create a show after the season finished and include women from all over New England to come present their work. And so it was kind of last minute. I was actually one of the choreographers in that very first show. And it was 2 weeks before the show date. It was let's do a show. So very spontaneous. But it came out really well, and the proceeds from the shows, they decided that they wanted to donate them, so they donated them to the Sojourner House, and that is a nonprofit here in Rhode Island working against domestic violence. So that's kind of how the second part of the mission was born. It was just that very first year, they were like, we want to do something good with this money. So that's what they did. And Kristy, Melissa, and I joined as co-directors in 2019, and we wanted to keep it going. So that's just kind of the two main halves of our organization we've just continued trying to provide opportunities for women as artists to present their work and also try to strengthen our own involvement in the Rhode Island community, fighting for gender equality and not even necessarily just in the arts, but really any industry.
Almost like a practice what you preach, it's about women in the arts, but it's so much more. It's here's this small microcosm of such a larger issue.
Well, I think it's also about our mission is to uplift and nurture female choreographers, but also we are an all-female run organization, and which touches on many facets of not only this community, but nationally. That's our goal, is to be to have national recognition in the dance world. So we're trying to touch on all these different issues. Thank you for the snaps.
Rhode Island pride, get Rhode Island organizations out there. Woo! I love it. Yeah, anything you wanted to add, Kristy, or not? I'll move right on.
I think the other ladies really summed it up well. I would like to add that the first year the project was made possible, Hannah and Louisa had found a woman who was interested in funding female work. And then there's an anonymous donor who kind of got Rhode Island Women's Choreography Project off of the starting blocks, if you will. And I think that's one of the big hurdles that women encounter. It's okay, so Louisa and Hannah saw this need, that there wasn't an outlet for their expression. They didn't have that. It wasn't being fed to them in their company. So, but just because you want to do that and you see a need for it and you see a need within your friends and your arts community doesn't mean that you have the ability to do it. So to be paired with this anonymous donor really it set everything on fire, and really that was how we were also able to keep the organization going. That was with a little bit of that initial donation the first year that we rolled into the second year, and that's really what we've been working on. So one of the major roadblocks is the financial roadblock for everything when it comes to equity for women. So that also is a big facet of what we're trying to do, is how can we remove as many roadblocks as possible.
Totally. And I would like piggyback off of that and just say that, like, you know, in any industry that we've already kind of touched on, like, money is power, you know, like decisions, votes get made off of dollars. And so, you know, prior to this year, we were actually an all volunteer run and led organization. In 2018, like, none of our dancers, choreographers were paid, the same in 2019. And like, looking at our mission and what we want to do, like, we made a decision going forward, like, we have to put, you know, money in the hands of women that are trying to change this field. So like, this was the year that we were first able to do that, which is a huge deal for us and a huge deal going forward, to be able to like do that and also like increase those dollars every year, you know?
Yeah, in COVID, that's not a small thing. Yeah, and you think about the gender pay gap, it's like literally 2/3 of women on average, and that's just even white women, you know, the 70%. If you look at Latinx women or Black women, it is less. Asian American women, it is less. And yeah, if you don't have those resources, I mean, it's hard enough in the arts already to kickstart something and to keep it going. So that is so true. I appreciate you all naming that, which I feel like is also a good segue into, I bet that a lot of people watching the show, watching this episode, are aware of the gender leadership gap, I might call it, in dance and choreography and administrative positions, the like, what have you. I would love to hear take from you all on that, sort of how you see that issue and why it matters, why it's a problem. So yeah.
Where to begin, I guess, is what I would say.
Really.
I would say, like, if you look at dance, right? If you look at ballet, the majority of the workforce is made up of women. The majority of audiences are also made up of women. The majority of donors are also made up of women. But then, as you just said, like, if you look at leadership, executive directors, resident choreographers, everything, they're all mostly statistically held by men. So, and it's not out of, what I was thinking about earlier when I was seeing these questions is like, it's not a supply and demand issue. It's not that like women don't want to be choreographers. That's not true. It's like, who is given the opportunities to be like kind of fed into this pipeline of leadership, and like, it's not happening for women, I think, is where I would start and let someone else take up the gauntlet on that.
I saw an interesting, it's certainly not my own words, but I saw this interesting, I don't even remember what article I was reading, but somebody somewhere said, you know, it's like these great male dancers, you know, they have these principal dancer careers and all of a sudden they become artistic directors, and like, they don't have necessarily the skill set to do that. Or why does being a male principal dancer give you the skill set to be an artistic director for a company when, you know, there's so many other women? But then you hear when other people speak, it's like, well, there's not a female who has the experience or the ability to do that or the credentials to do that. But like, why does the male principal dancer have that? I don't remember what article that I was reading, but I feel like that's kind of it. It's like these men in power positions in companies that are like famous and they have big names, and then they just all of a sudden segue into being artistic directors. And I don't know, I would argue that a woman who's moved up the ranks in the company and seen it all, from being the trainee to the apprentice to the corps de ballet to the soloist to the principal dancer, and has worked in all facets of the company, would have that experience just from their life experience to do a better job at the role, just by that information. And that's what I've got to say. I could go on, but
I would definitely agree with all of that. Just to throw a stat in there, Forbes had published that in 2019, which I feel like is kind of the last year that you can really use, because I feel like the pandemic year was just so strange. But 2019, like the last regular season that we had, over 80% of all major dance works were created by men, which is like kind of mind blowing to me. And I think there are several things that affect it. And one of them is just that core women. I don't think that this is the only reason, but definitely like an observation I've had and also read about is that ladies in the core are just so busy all the time doing core work, and just like, you know, point shoe, like maintenance, like so much of our brain is wrapped up in just being a dancer. And it's not that male dancers are not also busy, but they are less busy. They are in fewer rehearsals generally than women. And so they just kind of have the time to like develop creative ideas maybe. But like I said, that's not the reason I think that there are fewer women choreographers. It is just, it's so stark when you look at the numbers. In addition to choreography, I think the number is something like over 60% of artistic directors are also male. And yeah, it's just wild to me.
I mean, I think it goes to like two things for me. Like one is like, art is so often judged on whether it's good or it's bad, whether I liked it or I didn't like it when I see it. But the people that control what art I see are always the same type of person. So like if all of our leadership positions and all of our choreographer positions are held by males, I'm only ever seeing like a woman that's like needs help from a man on the main stage. And like, I'm only seeing one type of story when like the human experience is multicolored, multifaceted, you know, but I'm only seeing one dimension of it. And that's what we're teaching audiences is good art. And so like, I think that if we kind of expand the pool, it leads to this whole other richness that, you know, ballet and art can be. And then also, you know, the problem if like, you know, what Eugenia kind of just said of like women in ballet companies like don't have, you know, the time and the resources. And it's because like the ballet world doesn't actually readily provide them. We expect dancers to train from their 3 till like they're 16 to get a job, but we expect male choreographers to like walk out of a company and be like, I'm going to make a full-length ballet. Like it doesn't compute. So like, you know, one thing that we're all really passionate about is being able to provide as much as we can resource-wise to any female choreographer that has like a vision, you know, an idea and, you know, passion.
And on top of that, I think being a choreographer and being a leader are kind of synonymous. So we also want to encourage women to also be leaders in the dance industry. So, and I think that being a choreographer and getting that experience of standing at the front of the room, giving instructions to your dancers gives you an experience that's very invaluable of how to manage a team. Like if we're going to go into that, like how to speak to people in an efficient and like constructive way. Like those are all really important skills that you gain as a choreographer. And if you never let a woman experience that position, then how is she supposed to know how to be a leader in other facets of like the arts industry? So I feel like it's kind of No, it's not a stepping stone. Like they're two completely different jobs, being an artistic director or a choreographer, but they have a lot of overlap in the types of skills you're using. So I think it's really important that women feel confident in taking either one of those things on.
I think also to jump, oh, I'm so sorry, to jump on to Eugenia's point more as well. Females in dance companies are rarely outspoken. It is not something that is looked upon as a good trait especially in a female who's in a corps de ballet, right? You can't stand up for yourself or other people in the dance company and the dance world, unfortunately. I'm not saying that this is a good thing, but you're taught that your voice shouldn't be heard. So, and what is a choreographer? It's someone who's using movement to be their voice, right? So like women are taught that their voice is not valued, especially in the corps de ballet. And I think it's also got to be like, we can do part of it, but there also has to be a cultural change that values the female voice within the studio, and where it doesn't become a bad thing to be an outspoken dancer in a company, where you can stand up for yourself and your beliefs and feel like your job isn't going to be in trouble because of that, or you're not going to lose out on roles because you've spoken up for yourself or somebody else. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a cultural shift that we also have to make.
I was just about to use that word, cultural shift, because I think it's such a major thing that needs to happen. Because if you go back to the very beginnings of ballet, it's like women are always the muse or the spirit, the ghost, like whatever creature that doesn't have a voice, and then it's always the man coming in. So it's been that way from the beginning, but it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, the dancer in the corps, like your job is to be part of the group. Your job is not to be an individual. And that is 100% a cultural shift in the art form, and it speaks to, cultural values more widely, for sure. Yeah, I was thinking about, in choreography, the willingness to fail. That's like nebulous, but to try something and be like, no, that doesn't work. I'm going to try this, and to like take up that space. Like, dancers, I want you to try this. Nope. Like, women are acculturated to like be like squeamish about that, about like putting other people out, right? Or like expressing themselves in such a way and having that confidence to put something out. And like, that's what you need to do if you're an artist, if you're creating something. Like, I made this is authentic to me. It might resonate with you, it might not. I just thinking of how women are acculturated, I think that's huge in a way. And it's funny, Kristy, you're speaking about like certain principal dancers like pushed into being choreographers. I can think of one in particular, and I won't name names, but like he was really allowed to like publicly grow through the years, like his earlier work. So I was like, I don't think it's so great. But then like 5-10 years later, I would see his works and be like, wow, you really grew. And I just don't see women getting that same space to try something, maybe fail, again, nebulous, and then keep growing and growing. Yeah, women don't get that, I would say.
Yes, I would say like, I'm not a choreographer. That is not my wheelhouse. That's not my Super Bowl or anything, even though I'm a co-director of this project. But like, I would say that like, any choreographer, any female identifying choreographer, and anyone that gets to go through our program, like I would reframe whatever they think as a fail as a huge win. Through my eyes,
because
like,
you learn something.
Yeah, and also like you have a performance opportunity, and like even if you see it as a fail, like it's something that an audience got to see. And again, like it goes back to like, is art meant to just like, is dance meant to just be judged as good or bad? Like, and also like, if that's the binary, why does that matter? Like, it's not about that. It's about the conversation that it starts, and like, the emotions that it pulls from. But that's a whole other topic to bring up.
I mean,
I might have even said this to Eugenia. I heard something from a very wise artist once, like, I'm not interested in if art is good or bad. Does it resonate? What is the response it elicits? Is a way I love to think about it now. But again, that's the culture we're in, that cultural shift, that's the binary, good or bad. And people, I think that's why some people struggle with abstract art, because we're not acculturated to see that gray, you know, to ask those like more pointed, nuanced questions to dig deeper. And someone, I think I might have cut off. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's totally fine. I was going to respond to what you just said. And I think that it all, again, goes back to money, because I think dance companies are always just trying to figure out, like, how can we get the most people in the seats? Like, what's going to sell the best? What are people going to like the best? And so it doesn't become so much about like the exploration as it does about filling seats and getting grants and getting funding. And so, I mean, there's so many companies in Europe, for example, where dance is better supported, that they really don't really feel as much pressure to create a final product. It's just like, well, we're just going to play around. And I would say I even experienced that a little bit here at Festival Ballet, when we were lucky to receive like a very good grant during COVID to create a Nutcracker. And it felt freeing that there was no pressure of like, it was just, here you go, here are the resources to create something new. And it just makes such a big difference in how you think about the piece, I think. And so, yeah, it's always going back to money. Like, if we had the resources to allow ourselves to fail, quote unquote, over and over until we like start, you know, creating art that we're happy with, until then we're, I think, just limited a little bit by the resources and like having to get something done and having creating a product that people are expecting.
Yeah, and that's interesting. You're speaking to grants, getting, you know, butts and seats, selling those tickets. It's like you need that name recognition of this more well-known choreographer. So this woman who's trying to break in, yeah, it's almost this catch-22. Like, when does she get the chance? Because the artistic director, executive director, like finance person is like, no, we need to fill out this house to survive as a company.
I mean,
So
it goes back to like what we've been talking about, which is like a cultural shift. What does our institution value? Name recognition, fame, like doing the same thing over and over again because you know that it works. Like that's what a lot of this system like upholds. It's like, oh, like we know that people like to see Swan Lake because it's traditional and it looks good on the stage. Well, like, no, everyone knows the story and no one, like, that's not based in reality and it's very outdated and sexist. So I think it's just, going back to like the grants, like diversified, like where funding comes from is also a really important part of this. Like if, you know, like big arts institutions are like giving away money, they often have like this very much like, is it good, is it bad? But like from like governments and like other like family foundations and things like that, that are just kind of like, oh, like we want to support art. Like that can kind of like be more of like a flexible risk just because like they're like in it for more of like a general reason than like an art institution. Like, I don't want to name any names. Yes.
But that's where organizations like yours come in, right? Is helping artists get past that hurdle, you know, so they can have a work to show on video, so they can have a resume, a reel of their work, right? Because it's got to start somewhere.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I'll say like my first experience choreographing was for this project. And it was the first time I'd ever made anything. And since then I've continued making things. And I recently spoke with you, Catherine, about my newest piece, which was set at Festival Ballet Providence as a result of having done this project as a choreographer. So like very, very real impact. And I'm not the only one. We've had other choreographers that it was their very first time choreographing and they actually got other paid opportunities just from doing this project, which I think is amazing.
It's also nice that our project, we're still small enough, and I'm hoping that we can stay this way, is that our, you know, with a ballet company, they rely on something like Nutcracker for a certain percentage of their season budget, right? We've been lucky enough through individual donations and through grants to fund our project in such a way that we aren't necessarily reliant to get butts and seats, which I think is really important because it does allow the choreographers to just create and to play, and we're not relying on some big name added to our program to bring people in. You know, the choreographers are going to get paid regardless of whether we sell 1 ticket or 100 tickets, and I think that's really, really important because it brings like that play aspect back into it and just allows them to have a situation where they can experiment and create, and people come see it, and that's also wonderful, and we can share it, and then they have a performance at the end, but we're not reliant on that for our saving for our life.
I mean, another relief of not being reliant on like our once yearly project is that like all 3 of us and everyone that works with us is on board to make all of our ticket prices like very accessible. So like our virtual production, which barring any future pandemics, we don't really plan to do again, you know, knock on all of the, you know, wood, but like it was pay what you can starting at $5. And then regularly our ticket prices in the past have been like about 15. And we don't really have any plans to like ever have tickets for like, you know, over anything really over that, just because like it should be enjoyed, you know, it should be accessible to anyone who wants to come. And that's something that I feel really proud of this organization for like kind of being a stick in the mud about. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, there have been articles describing like the graying of the arts and like these older established people who have money, like that's the patrons. Well, what happens when they go out? It's like, so to bring in the next generation, to engage them in dance, make them fall in love with dance, make them want to be lifelong patrons and enjoyers and supporters. And, you know, with shifting social mores, we talked about, you know, the cultural shift that is happening slowly each year. Just as things happen, people evolve, we start talking about things differently in society. It's like, there are going to be people that will want to see more female names in the program, stronger female dancers, female characters that don't fit that like Swan Lake, as you said, archetype. Yeah, that is pretty sexist and outdated. Yeah, so everything you're saying, it's really where it's all moving, and importantly so, and you're pushing it forward. Yeah. So towards the second part of the mission, I would love to hear more about how you support certain Rhode Island nonprofits, and if there are any kind of challenges particular to Rhode Island that your organization has been part of addressing through those nonprofits, if that makes sense. And then you can go right ahead. All 1, 2, 3, whatever you'd like.
We're like, who's going? I'll just say a little bit. Some of the nonprofits that we've worked with include like Sojourner House from 2018, or the Women's Fund of Rhode Island was our partner in 2019. And they're just working for general gender equity in Rhode Island, getting grants out to women. And then I mentioned that the other one is like domestic violence, which is also like very prevalent. And basically what we've been doing is having a speaker from the organization come to speak at one of our performances, and like promoting their mission on our social media and just sort of like a general partnership. And then we have also donated portions of our proceeds to those organizations in the past. This past year, I just want to note, in 2020, we didn't do a show. In 2021, because of the pandemic, we decided to not do an official partnership. And instead we had all of the proceeds, or rather we used a portion of the proceeds that we got to augment the stipends for the choreographers that we had this year. Which I felt was really important because it's just such a strange year. They're having to navigate COVID regulations, and they're having to like really figure a lot of things out and put more work into it than they normally would if we were providing studio space and dancers for them. So we just felt like we wanted to help them out a little bit more. So we did not have a nonprofit partner this past year. But that's kind of the general framework of, we partner with one organization that we feel has like a foot in gender equity, a foot maybe in another facet of the Rhode Island community. Like other nonprofits we've looked at include like food stability, which is super important. So it's not necessarily like just gender equity, but the issues I think here they're not unique to Rhode Island at all. They're very much national issues. But in my opinion, at least, because we're a Rhode Island organization, I think we owe it to our state to like throw our support behind our initiatives and our organizations and like be a leader on the national scene for the issues that we're fighting for. So yeah, but definitely not anything Rhode Island specific here. These issues affect much more than Rhode Island.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, maybe part of why I asked this, I just thought of it maybe subconsciously. I know following the Great Recession, Rhode Island was, at one point, I think it was the hardest hit state in the country with unemployment. And women do have a harder time dealing with things like resume gaps, you know, which is part of the gender pay gap, because if you take time to have a baby and spend time with your baby, then you come back and you make way less money. So yeah, I think that's interesting, but yeah, none of that also that's nationwide, but we can think nationally, even globally in a sense, and act locally. I think that's a really powerful way of making change.
I love that way that you put it, thinking globally, but acting locally. I feel like that's exactly what we do. And also I'm gonna pass it off in a second, but another thing that I've thought of just now when you said that is also geographically, because we are kind of right in between Boston and New York City. It's very difficult to get a lot of funding just because proportionally we're so small. So that's another thing.
Yeah.
There's a term.
So much competition for breadcrumbs, I feel like I've heard from artists.
There's to go right off of that, there's a term called the nonprofit Hunger Games. Basically the idea of just like nonprofit, like in all facets, like of different types of nonprofits, just competing for like the same funding, which is kind of like ridiculous, you know, and it just shows like the billionaires have too much money and like, you know, not enough people pay their taxes, etc. But I mean, what it also goes to is like collaboration, I think, is something that's really important to us as an organization and also to our community, and to, you know, show our support of, you know, other great work that's happening, because like we think our work is awesome and like we want to share it with our community, but we also want to be like cognizant to know that, like, you know, women in dance is not the only big issue of the day. Like we should also, you know, bring other issues to light to audiences that also have like a shared mission, you know, and it's going to take like a heavy lift from like everyone that's involved with us to change like what we want to see. Yeah, I would leave that there for now.
Absolutely. You know, I feel like the arts are underappreciated, under-resourced. But at the same time, like I have this show on social change and social justice and dance, like dance must be involved with these issues, with the community, you know, and bold in that way, boldly tackling as art powerfully can, you know, in its own way.
And jumping in there on what you said with dance and the arts being underappreciated in this country, it makes me think back and get really angry about this past year, because when the pandemic happened, like and everybody was stuck in their homes, like what did everybody fall back on? Like there was no sports, there was no this, there was no that, like but what was producing content? You know, ballet companies were putting their digital libraries online and people were turning to the arts. You know, we were listening on the news to opera singers singing opera in the streets in Italy. Like it's all the arts. They're so underappreciated, but when you boil it down at the end of the day, they're so vital, and it is what people rely on. And it really did get people through this past year. And I just wish that like it has so quickly turned away from the arts, even in just the past year, that it's just infuriating that all of these people who just took so much appreciation, and then the second that they didn't need it anymore, they just turned their back. So I would hope that also we can just grow that appreciation and remind people like what got you through, what got you through the past year, you know.
I think it's
That was
also
a meme on Facebook, I think. Like, try to get through the pandemic, no Netflix, no books, no music, nothing like that, no music video, dance, or anything like that. Like, and then try the arts don't matter. But go ahead, Melissa, I cut you off.
like to bring it back to like the nonprofit partnership. Like, I think that I struggle to use this word, and I don't think this is the right word, but like in an effort to like educate, and that's the word I don't want to use, like audiences about why the arts are important, is like showing them that like it touches on not just your entertainment portion of your life, like the arts can tell stories and bring out emotions and spark conversations, and that's why it's important, like what the conversations are bringing up. And yeah, I think that like, yes, the arts are underappreciated, and like people, if they sit down with their own thoughts, could probably come up with that by themselves. But sometimes I think you have to show people like why and how that they can support and appreciate the arts, which I think kind of ties into like what we're trying to do with like uplifting different organizations like in our own community.
Yeah, and you spoke beautifully before about the importance of diverse voices in creation, making new dance work in every other field of art or anything you make. And yeah, it's like, lost my train of thought, but it'll come back to me.
Like, it's a can of worms. Like, once you just like think about like women not being in like choreographer positions, it just trickles down, and then you just get mad about like everything.
Yeah, I can't think about it too much, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
I have to kind of like shut it off at a certain point, like we're done for the day.
It's a lot, but you're doing the work, and that's the important thing. It's like you can sit there and get mad about it and yell about it on Facebook, which I do sometimes, yell about things that make me mad on social media. But it's like at some point you got to put in the work. It has to be action more than just talk.
And I will say, I do think that you mentioned this before, I do think we're moving in a good direction, like generally, not speaking to funding of the arts in general, but just in terms of gender equity in the arts. It's very, very, very slow, but I do think it is moving upwards. So baby steps.
Yep. Just came to me my thought that I had before, and the train left the station, now came back. This idea of the ecosystem of the arts, right? It's like there's pop culture, and it's kind of everybody knows that, they'll pay for that, and it's monetized such that you can go to the movies and spend, it's getting really expensive, but $10, 11, 12, 13 bucks, see a movie. But these smaller scale filmmakers, or, in any art form, smaller scale choreographers, all of that is necessary to get to that wider scale art. Like, for every Beyonce, Steven Spielberg, like all of these like household names in art that we know, like they had a certain amount of support, like it has to come from somewhere. It's like a funnel, right? There's this ecosystem that feeds into something that will be widely appealing. And there's no really like huge moral or whatever or creative value to something that's like extremely popular, but it does take that, right, to supporting arts at all levels, so someone can get up to that place where they produce something that, again, is widely accessible. So, book idea on that, like brewing back here somewhere, maybe someday, but anyways.
I do think that a large amount of that too comes from just how we're raised from childhood. I think there's a lot more emphasis in America, for example, on like certain sports, and like when you get into high school, you join the cheerleading team, which like that's could be considered an art on its own, but it's like there's a very large focus for children to enjoy certain activities. And I think as you grow up and you go through your teenage years, you become a young adult, you kind of just stick with what you know. So there's no, I feel that the appreciation for the arts really needs to start from earlier in life. And that also obviously goes back to like outreach and like getting the arts out into the community and encouraging people to like bring their children. And I mean, that's one of the great things about the Nutcracker is that it does encourage children to come see maybe their first show ever, and then they get hooked on it. I mean, you hear so many stories about kids saying, I saw the Nutcracker and then I said, I want to become a dancer. And even if they don't become a dancer, they like, you can take dance in high school and then you graduate and you still have that appreciation for it. And you're probably going to go see the local dance company wherever you are. You might donate to that company, even if you're now doing something completely different in a different industry. So I think that it's just another missing piece of the puzzle right now. It's like getting kids more involved in that like appreciation right from the start of life. Yeah.
Yeah. Like thinking of going to see Nutcracker. I've seen it a million times, you know, the snow paw or like, you know, the sugar plum and cavalier paw at the end. Like, just imagine if you're 5 years old and you see that the first time, like humans can do that. Like, just imagine what wonder that brings to you, right? And inspiring you to, yeah, you know, maybe for the rest of your life, go see dance often, go take classes a couple nights a week at a local studio, you know?
Sorry, I do feel like that was a little bit of a tangent I took, but I feel
No,
like
that
it's
was
kind of
I love
related.
And like, if we want to
Totally,
really
totally. I love
talk
it.
if we really want to talk about tangents, I'll go on one like really quick. You can cut this in editing if you want.
Take it away. Take it
But I
away.
don't know if anyone has seen the PBS documentary about the Joffrey Ballet's like new Nutcracker from a few years ago, but it's choreographed by Christopher Wheeldon, and it's really awesome. Like instead of Mother Ginger, they have like kids come out dressed as like walnuts, and it's really cute. But anyway, what one person brought up in the interview is like the problem with the Nutcracker, and is a problem that I now have with the Nutcracker, is like it's the story of this rich girl that like doesn't have enough of everything, even though she has everything, and then goes to sleep and like dreams about like having more of everything. And like, you know, in our capitalist society, like that is just so not based in reality and is like not the experience of like most people in the audience, which is like kind of like a big problem that I have with a lot of dance storytelling. But the Joffrey Ballet's Nutcracker doesn't do that story, and it has like story much more based in like Chicago history and et cetera, and end of scene. Yeah.
Is that the hot chocolate Nutcracker, or
It's
is that
not.
something different?
It's based about like the World's Fair.
I was gonna say it's the circus,
Nice.
right?
It's like the World's Fair that took place like in Chicago like many years ago, and that's like the design. And it's about an immigrant family, and that's like the main family. That's like Claire's family, and like her mother is poor and she's a single mother, and she goes to like she doesn't have like anything for Christmas, and then like they go to sleep and they dream about this new world. And like, yes, I don't want to spoil it because there's like a plot twist at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Is there really a plot twist?
Yeah,
There's like sort of a plot twist. There's sort of
with a plot twist. I love it.
I don't want to spoil it. I encourage everyone to go see the PBS documentary. I think it's online. We
Love
can
it.
link in the show notes.
Yeah, there's some companies doing really innovative, cool things with this story that's been around forever to make it work for the times. Because at a certain point, it's like the same like huge tree and all these presents and all the kids come in all their finery like marching out, and like at a certain point it's like, how much is that relevant to 2021, whatever year where we get to?
Well, like what you brought up is
yeah.
like the ballet audience is aging out. Like ballet donorship pools are aging out. So like today's consumer, like younger people, like, you know, I don't know what kind of age range, but like care about like what their clothes are made out of, where their food comes from. Like they're going to care about the entertainment they consumed and like how it got to be where it is. So like if we're not taking cues from what consumers want and value, like we're going to miss out.
100%. I feel like I could talk to you all day, but to begin to wrap up, it is also uncertain because of COVID. And I think when you mentioned it's a sort of yearly show, but that aside, what is next, maybe a certain goal you're looking towards, something you want to work on, what can we support you with? What can we look forward to? What can we look out for with RIWCP?
So we are a yearly project. We just wrapped up our 2021 project, and the hope, and fingers crossed that it'll be possible, is that we'll be back fully live and in person in spring of 2022. We're still working out the details, but what that would look like would be a 3-week rehearsal period for choreographers and dancers, and then a performance at the end. Something really cool that we haven't really talked about today that we added on this year that we're looking to build on more next year is we started a mentorship program this year. So each of our choreographers was paired with a mentor who is an established female choreographer in the field, and I'm really, really excited to continue to build that project as we go back into a live and in-person format, and how much can we support our choreographers in their growth with this mentor choreographer relationship.
And if any young female dancer choreographers out there would be interested, is that something you can just find on the website, an application? How can you get looped in?
We have a website. We are on all the social media platforms. We will be releasing applications this winter for the spring show. We have a mailing list. We have everything. So you can go to our website or our Instagram and get signed up. It's just RI Women's Choreography Project on Instagram and the website both. And yeah, I think just like getting people involved and like getting your fellow arts supporters in your life involved, and even anyone who's not necessarily tied with the arts but cares about gender equity. I feel that there's a lot of crossover, and there's a lot of work to be done. So we need we need everyone on board. And it's just, I mean, it's great. Like the bigger our community grows, it's just exciting to be able to connect like with our audiences and with new supporters and with our dancers. So yeah, get in touch.
I would just end with like, it's daunting, as we talked about, like how to, shift this needle. But if, our work resonates with anyone listening, I would say like pick one way to support us or an organization that you think is doing good work. And that's by, clicking a follow button, that's liking a post, that's sharing it, that's donating $5, that's signing up for a mailing list. Pick one, and I think that all of these little actions can really snowball into something huge.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I've worked in social media more like through COVID past year and change. And just like these little things that, because the way the algorithms work, like even one like a subscribe to a newsletter, it really does start to add up to support, say something that you're passionate about. So easy ways to support. Awesome. Yeah, so that's sort of all I have. Thank you so much again. If there's anything else that we didn't touch on that you'd like to share, please go ahead.
I don't know. I mean,
like leave the space.
I feel like I could talk for another hour, so I'm just gonna say this is good.
Yes, thank you so much for having us, and for letting us speak about what we do and what we're passionate about. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. And
I love your shirt.
Yes.
Thank you. I was big into Elizabeth Warren's campaign, so I bought a lot of Warren merch.
I love it.
But this is like forever, universal, right? All right. Thank you so much again. Such my pleasure. Thank you to you all for taking the time and sharing your insights, experiences about this issue, which ties into so much else. Again, we could keep talking, but we will wrap it up. Thank you so much, everyone watching. If this resonated with you, please like, comment, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff. Share it with someone who you think also might enjoy it. And we will see you next time. Thanks so much.